Welcome to Augmented Teachings. Let's talk about the things that will inspire us to think better, feel better, and in turn be better. I'm your host, Todd Michael Jackson. I'm here with Brandi Pagano. How you doing, Brandi?
I'm wonderful, thank you. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. So I really enjoyed our last podcast, and I'm really excited about today's podcast.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
I know, it's so awesome. So this podcast, I wanted to touch on certain things like judgment. All right. So one of the things I ended with on the last podcast we had was past life review. And at the end of your past life review, no matter how good or how bad you did, God will say, "Are you ready?" Mm-hmm. Right? And with no judgment. Wait, how come God's supposed to judge us according to the Christian religion, right? God judges us. He's a big judge with a big gavel in the sky, right? No, it doesn't work that way. God's love is unconditional. Why is that? Why is God's love non-judgmental? Why? And I have an answer. So what I like to do is explain if there's actually good and bad in the world.
Okay.
Right? So we will look at first a human, all right? A human being which does bad things, right? Usually when a soul is younger, they're here, say 10 times, right? And they make a lot of mistakes. They may do the R word, the M word, they may steal, they may do all kinds of horrible things, right? Mm-hmm. Led by fear, judgment, ego, and that turns into hate when you mix those together. And they're led by these dysfunctionalities that they can't overcome because they're victims of their own vessel, right? So as a soul comes here more and more often, they learn to overcome these dysfunctionalities, and they're able to fight back and balance their soul to fight back and actually be more benevolent as lifetime after lifetime come and go. So when I see a person who's committed atrocities, I can't really look at the person and say that was a bad person, a bad soul. That soul is more than likely a very young soul and does not know how to control his or her vessel in a way that's becoming. So it's like, is a second grader a bad student if they don't know Algebra 2? No, they're just not there yet. Mm-hmm. They might be straight A's in their class. They might be doing really good for how their age, or very bad for their age. We don't know, right? But they're not going to know Algebra 2. They just
don't have the awareness or the understanding yet.
You're right, exactly, because they're a young soul.
Right.
You can't learn unconditional love in one lifetime. It just doesn't happen. We don't live long enough, right? So
not enough time.
Not enough time. So when you look at the soul, the human being itself, you really can't judge it. You have to understand if a person is a danger to society, then you have to look at the action and say, you know what, let's put this person in a place where they can't hurt others. So, but the soul itself isn't necessarily bad, just young. Because a young soul will do that, an older soul just won't. An older soul will choose a path of compassion, a path of altruism, instead of a path of me, my. What can I get? And they learn a we mentality, lifetime after lifetime, while a young soul has a me mentality, right? Of fear and anger and all this other stuff. So you look at the action, you say, well, the action was bad. And then we look at it a little closer, and we say, okay, say this person had an action of murder. All right, we'll say murder.
Okay.
All right. And they commit murder, and then lifetime later, karma comes in, cleans that up, and they in turn are killed. And then they murder again, and they get killed, and they.
So that pattern continues over lifetimes?
Continues over and over and over, until that soul's like, nah, I'm kind of done with that. I'm done with that. I'm not going to do that anymore because I've learned through karma not to do that. Karma is the great equalizer, and God created it so that none of God's children will ever be able to get over on another one of God's children. Maybe in the short term, but never in the long term. So when you look at a person that say maybe murdered 7 times, it gets the end of its cycle. Say that soul's been here 100 times. And the first 20 years were tumultuous, and it killed 7 people. But in turn was killed 7 times. And this soul at the very end is like, yes, God, I'm ready to go back. I'm ready to stay. I'm ready to stay in the light because I've learned unconditional love and I'm a benevolent soul. Right? You look back, you look back 80 lifetimes ago and you're like, well, were those actions bad? Or were they necessary steps for the development of that soul?
Right, necessary.
So it's more of a sticky situation. Or you look through a keyhole, and you look at a person's life, just one lifetime, it's very easy to make a decision. But when you look at the whole grandeur of that soul's journey, then that one action taught that soul not to kill, eventually. So that's why God has no judgment on us, because God knows you have to perform all these atrocities to learn not to perform atrocities, eventually. And that's why God's love is always unconditional, because we are here to learn, not to be judged. So, is there good and bad in the world? No. The only thing that exists is perpetual learning with karma keeping everything in check.
I like that.
So, I'm going to put that on a t-shirt.
I know, right? Rewind that and let's hear it again.
So, how you been? You been good?
Oh, I've been fantastic. Living life and...
Awesome. You told me some great stories when we were, away from here. And there are times that we find ourselves really shooken in life, and we come to find God through different means in different ways. And I think it's a beautiful thing that through our pain, we find comfort and solace in finding God, and understanding what the purposes of life are. And my heartache, I wouldn't wish upon anybody else, but man, I wouldn't trade it for anything either, because it brought me to this point.
Thank you for touching on that.
And I think there are certain things that we're supposed to learn in a certain time, in a certain way. But I hope people hear this podcast and understand that the goal is to work the puzzle of unconditional love and to bring back beautiful experiences. All right? And sometimes the most beautiful experiences are not the pleasant ones. So I'm going to tap into something here, a topic that people love to talk about, and that's ghosts. So we can relive our moment anytime we want. Our lifetime is our Blu-ray, all right? We can replay experiences whenever we want, right? So one of the things that does not exist back home in heaven is sorrow. So our most sorrowful moments are sometimes our most cherished because we earn them through loss of love. So sometimes you hear about the bride that her husband-to-be dies on the day before the wedding night, and you see her walking down in the wedding dress crying, and she relives that moment again and again and again, because those moments were earned through learning love and losing love. Having the love for the man, but not being able to experience it anymore, and feeling the loss of that companion will actually produce moments that we revisit over and over and over. So there's times that, you've had great experiences and you relive those. There's sometimes you've had just like mundane experiences and relive those. So as I tell people, ghosts, when you see a level 1 ghost in period, especially in a period attire, they're just reliving their life. They're just having a moment where they're experiencing what they had before, because they're in heaven and they're just having a little fun. They're watching a Blu-ray of themselves and having the experiences and feeling all the senses that they had at that time, because everything's recorded, because everything is God. It's recorded vibrationally through our cells. And I hope that people understand that we have a lot to learn and a lot to give. And as we learn to give more and more of ourselves, we learn more about ourselves. So there are certain things that we look at, like as far as we learn, like judgment and of others and of groups, and we learn to overcome those things. And as we overcome those things, we learn compassion and empathy, and we find the strength to accept who we are as we learn compassion for others. So one of the things that we do here at this church, which is called
The High Desert Center for Spiritual Living.
Wow, that's awesome. Not me, you and the practitioners will light a candle for every religion.
Yes.
Yes, acceptance of all.
Right.
So how does that go exactly?
Well, that ceremony is called the Flames of Faith. And here at the High Desert Center for Spiritual Living, we perform the Flames of Faith ceremony to promote the universal consciousness of life.
Yes.
Which acknowledges that all peoples and all faith, all beings come from the one great universal presence, which we call Spirit or God, whatever word you want to use. And we start with the unity candle, and that represents the unifying nature of all religious thought and experience, and that we honor here.
Yes.
And so we actually have 11 candles that we light.
Nice.
And if I can quickly go through some of
Sure,
those with you.
please do. I enjoy it.
So we light the first candle for the shamanic traditions,
Yes.
honoring the beliefs and practices of all indigenous people.
Yes.
The way of primal spirituality.
Yes. Native Americans, yes.
Yes. And then we light the second candle, which is the candle for Hinduism, honoring the path of knowledge, action, and devotion.
Nice.
We light the third candle for the Tao, honoring the universal path of harmony and equilibrium.
Sweet.
Which is the natural way of balance, right? Balance and harmony.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yin and yang.
Yes. We light the fourth candle for Judaism, honoring the ethical path of living by sacred law.
Great.
We honor the fifth candle for all forms of Buddhism, honoring the Four Noble Truths and the path of compassion.
Four Noble Truths.
Yes, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit
Yeah,
later.
that'd be great.
We honor the sixth candle for all forms of Christianity, honoring the Christ consciousness, which is what we were speaking about in our last
Yes, Christ. Yeah, can't go
podcast.
wrong.
Right, the Christ consciousness as the path of love, because isn't that what Jesus taught?
Yes,
the path
it is.
of love.
And acceptance for all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the seventh candle is all forms of Islam, honoring the path of compliance with the will of God.
Yes, great.
The eighth candle for the universalistic religion of Baha'i, honoring the path of unity and peace.
Sweet.
The ninth candle, acknowledging all forms of new thought, honoring the metaphysical path of mental healing through the practice of universal spiritual principle.
Wait, I'm New Thought. Cool. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
absolutely. And then we light the 10th candle for inclusivity, affirming that all are welcome.
Yes.
Because all is God, right? We were talking about that earlier.
Everything.
Yes.
So whenever you reject something or somebody, you are literally rejecting God.
Absolutely.
Rejecting God.
Right.
I just got that right now. Oh my gosh, that was a moment.
And that's why that's such a sacred ceremony for me and for the people here to honor. Because as we're honoring each path, each philosophy, each way of life, we are honoring God.
Right.
You know? And we touch on namaste. You know,
Namaste.
the God in me
We
recognizes
yes.
and acknowledges the God in you. So what I do unto myself, I do unto you.
You.
What I do unto you, I do unto myself.
Yes, exactly.
And
Directly and indirectly.
absolutely, right. Now or later, it's all part of the one.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. So I think I want to touch on a subject to bring acceptance from a group that's been targeted. And that's the homosexual community.
Yes.
And I think we need to nip this in the bud like immediately. Especially since the justices are like eyeballing it. And I'm like, no, you don't do that. This is a process. This is a natural process of God, period. You're like, that's not godly. Well, I'll explain it right now. So, as I explained before, we come here lifetime after lifetime because we can't work the puzzle of unconditional love in one lifetime. It takes hundreds of lifetimes. And you come back as you see fit in whatever religion, whatever nationality, and whatever gender will help you the most, and with the parents that'll help you the most in that situation.
Right.
Right? So sometimes we'll grow the best as a male. You know, we need to be a male in this situation, in this country, in this religion, and this will help me understand this and learn these things. And then you go to another lifetime, you're a male again, and then you're male again, and then you're male again, and you're male again. And then you do it 10, 15 times, and you're like, oh, you know what? I'm going to go start working as, over this new lifetime, I'm going to be a female. Well, just because you're in a female body doesn't mean you now recognize that you're a female. You still think yourself as a male. You still are programmed to think like a male. So that's how you recognize your soul is still attached to that energy of being a male. So when you come into a female, you may not like males. You may think of male genitalia as you did as you were a man.
Right.
Not something you want. Right. And you come in as a female and you're like, this isn't cool. I still like the ladies. Right. And that's how it works. When you make the transition to a new gender, you still may see yourself as the old gender, especially when you've been in that gender for a long time. You know, sometimes it's lesser. Sometimes maybe the person was only a male a few times, maybe 5 times, and they come back into female and they're like, I'm kind of bi. I kind of like both, right? I can go either way. And sometimes they're like, oh, I'm lesbian. I was a man enough times where I know what I like, right? And then sometimes women come in and they're like very masculine in their ways and their attributes, you know? Flannel shirts and, you know, utility boots. That's their thing, you know? Because they were a male 20 times in a row. You know, it just depends.
And so they're vibrating
at that frequency, okay. And they're very male in their ideology, in their function. They feel like a male. And they don't, and sometimes it's so bad, they want to change their body. And they change their body so that they can fit how they feel inside. So they can
feel more authentic, you think?
And feel like how they're supposed to feel. I'm supposed to have different plumbing. This is not right. I need something changed. And what are these things on my chest? You know, this isn't right. I don't like this. It doesn't feel comfortable for me. And that's the thing is I hope somebody gives this podcast to the justices and be like, hey, you know what? You should listen to this. Because you know what? All those guys who really love women, and I'm seeing you guys, right? When you come back as a female, because you have to work both sides, both genders. When you come back as a female, you still may like women just as much as you do now. So remember, if you do it to them, if you change the laws against homosexuals, you are changing laws against yourself eventually.
Right.
Just remember that. And there's not many places where people can make the gender swap. You can't go to the Middle East and make a gender swap. You'll die. They'll kill you. Iran has no homosexuals. Why? Because they kill them.
Wow.
So there's only certain places you can make the gender swap. That's why so many people wait in one gender for such a long period of time. There's very few places you can do it. So when they find a place they can go, you know, they go. And if you were a person that judged homosexuals very harshly with anger, God forbid violence, when you make your gender swap, it may not be in Frisco. It may be Alabama. You understand what I'm saying? Because you will learn what it is to be oppressed because you oppressed.
Right.
As you do unto others, it is done unto you.
It is that law of balance, right?
Law of balance, right?
Yes.
So I hope people hear this and be like, oh, now I know. And knowing's half the battle. And make a conscious decision to say, you know what? That makes sense. Maybe I should be a little more forgiving, maybe a little more conscientious towards others.
And I think if more people understood that in the way that you just explained it, I think things would be a lot different. And if I can share something from the Bible, actually. I was not a student of the Bible, but sometimes I do like to get some of the teachings and understand them in the way that I can.
Sounds great.
In the International Version, it says, "So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you.
Yep.
For this sums up the law and the prophets."
That's right.
So if they would understand, if people could understand that what you do unto others, you're doing unto yourself.
Right.
And that eventually it is going to come back to you, because we are all part of that one. And eventually you're going to have to see from that other perspective and live that experience, right?
Right.
Of contrast.
And the crazy thing is, it's never done to you. When you go back home, you have no ego. You ask for it to be done to you.
Right, to get a better understanding.
To get a better
right?
understanding, right. It's not like, oh, I'm forced to be in a place where homosexuals are overly scrutinized. No, you're going to ask to be put there.
Right, because that's the evolution of the soul.
Right.
Right, to grow.
Right. And there's no ego, and we realize what our purpose is to develop our soul.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah, continue, please. You have another?
Well, no, that was it on that one.
Okay.
Yeah, just talking about doing unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Exactly.
Really.
And that fits this situation perfectly, because if you do this to others, eventually you're gonna have to make the switch. And if you make America one of those places where you can't make the switch easily, you just made it harder for yourself to make the switch from one gender to another. So there are certain things that I want to talk about in judgment, and we're gonna go back. Oh, we like to keep the subjects light around here, right? So I'm gonna go with another justices thing they just did. Roe versus Wade.
Here we go.
So what it is to be human is, like I talked about with Adam and Eve, is Adam and Eve were the first humans. They weren't the first vessels. A human is when you have a vessel and a soul together. That's how Adam and Eve had Cain and Abel Cain and Abel married women from a neighboring village of people, vessels. They weren't humans, they were vessels. God advanced these vessels so that it can inhabit a soul. All right, so we went to Roe versus Wade, and I will tell you right now, from all the testimonies that I've read where they've talked about when they entered their vessel, it was never in the beginning. It was always at the very end, for two reasons. One, the purpose of life is to have experiences. There's no experiences in the vessel, in the womb. There's no experiences. You're also here to learn unconditional love. You can't learn that in the womb. Most times, people enter their vessel in the last weeks, days, and sometimes, because it ain't that much fun, hours before they're born. Because the more time you're in the womb, because time here is linear and time there is circular, every day that you're in the womb is hundreds of years, thousands of years less in heaven. You know what I'm saying? So we're like, I'm going to go 49 minutes before I'm born, I'm going to go in then.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing to learn and there's no experiences to be had. You know, of course, people always say, well,
the vessel is just developing, right?
It's developing. It's not even enough matter there for a soul to enter. Okay. Right? So it's not a human, it's a vessel still. It's just a vessel, not a human yet. A human is when a soul and a vessel meet. So, one of the things that I like to explain is that when you have a soul and a vessel together, it's a human. When you have an animal, well, we have no problem killing animals. An animal actually has a little bit of a soul. We were talking about that and how you sang to your donkey.
The cows and the donkey.
Right,
yeah.
right. And animals can choose to reincarnate if they've been touched by the love of a human. They may not, but they may, right? So wolf, no. Zebra in the wild, probably not, right? I don't want to get eaten by a lion twice. But yes, if it's been touched by love of a human, it may choose to come back. A donkey, that donkey you sang to, had a little sliver, a tiny piece of what we have,
right?
But a little bit of a soul. So it actually is more of God, of soul, right in there, than there is in that vessel in the womb. There is no soul. There is none. It's just a vessel. It is even. So the justices took the rights away from a human and gave it to a vessel. Especially in the first trimester, in the second trimester. There is no soul attached. It is not a human yet. We are made in the image of God, which is the vibration of God will create a vessel with a torso, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. Right? So when it has a tail and it's in a fetal position and it's like curled up, it has none of those things. It's not even in the image of God yet. And it has no soul attached. So it's not a human yet. It's a vessel. And that's all it is. So you give those rights back to the human. Take them back away from the vessel, because that's all it is. And there's nobody attached to it yet. We don't enter to the very end, because there's nothing to learn and there's no experiences to be had. Right? So I tell people this and they get a little perturbed, but I keep going. And you have choices. A lot of the times, the situations that we find ourselves in, when in destitute situations, where we find that we can't have a baby because the situation is so bad. It's so bad, so violent, so hopeless, so destitute, that having a baby right now would be unfair. It'd be unfair to the child to have them at this moment in time, where maybe down the road, a year or two, would be greener pastures. So a mother makes a choice of empathy and compassion for a child that she does not want to bring into a hopeless, destitute situation. Most of the time, I've never heard of any woman saying, I had an abortion because I wanted to know what murder was like. They do it out of acts of compassion. And then you have the other side where they're like, oh, this person is a murderer, this person is this, and passing judgment. God does not see actions, God only sees intent. This person had the intent of love of another human enough to not bring it into a bad situation. While you sit there and point the finger in judgment, your intent was hate. Their intent was love. So go ahead and enjoy that for a little minute. Just let that soak in, because that is messed up. You don't live in judgment of others and say, I'm godly, because God sees your hate. God feels your hate. And when you get home, you will feel your hate. Well, the person who had to make that tough decision, if it was done because they're a psychopath and they're like, I want to know what murder was like, then the karma will be dealt. But I've never known any woman that got an abortion because of hate. It was because of compassion for bringing a soul into a green, prosperous situation, and they couldn't do that. Especially if they're still in high school, or if they're victims of some type of violence. Right. Well, I wouldn't bring I wouldn't bring a child in for that monster of a person. Right. And especially if they're 17, even if they're with somebody and they lie, because men will lie to say get anything they want, and she finds out she's pregnant, and their boyfriend's already gone with two other girls already. You know what I'm saying? Right. And she's still in high school. I'm like, I actually got accepted to college. I'm going to have that child later on down the road, 4 years after I get out, 4 years later I'm out of college, and I'm making, I'm middle class. I'm not living on the system, on the welfare system. I want to bring my baby into a situation that's more prosperous for it, whatever it is. And that's one of the things is it an act of love and compassion? God knows, because God feels all vibration and God knows all intent. So we have to look at certain situations in certain ways to get an understanding of how things work. There will be a time when you may find yourself, not this lifetime maybe, but lifetimes down the road, where you find yourself in a destitute situation and you bring a baby into a situation that's bad or unwanted or neglected because you don't have the resources to take care of it properly. Would that be an act of God, or would it be an act of selfishness? So that's my take on that.
Yeah, I know there's some heaviness behind that.
Yes,
there really is.
And I think a lot of us need to open up our eyes to what God is. God is love, and we learn, and as acts of love, we learn sacrifice. And all these women had to sacrifice in the name of love to not bring a child into a bad situation. And if these men are too ignorant or blind to see it, I guess I know where you're coming back.
Yeah.
It just, you're going to be in a situation to be like, I need to learn. So put me in this situation next time, so that I can learn what it's like to be lied to, or God forbid, a violent situation where I have a choice, a hard decision to make. Then, only then, I think maybe some of these justices would understand compassion, because they had to go through it themselves. So I think they'll be doing a lot of learning. Hopefully they hear some of the stuff that was said here today, so they have an understanding that you have two choices. You can choose hate and judgment, or you can choose compassion and empathy. And I know you want to give empathy and compassion to a vessel, but it's just a vessel. Give the rights back to a human. A human is when a vessel and a soul are together.
Wow.
So
I'm not sure really where to go with that one, honestly.
No? Yeah, it's
yeah.
So we like to keep the topics light, like I said.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So let's talk about, you know what? Here's a good one. Let's talk about
gun control. All right, let's do that.
Sure, why not? So, the last podcast we had, we talked about how, as we learn unconditional love, we lean on our DNA, allowing us to bring more of our soul into these vessels, and bringing more of our attributes that we have back home in heaven into these vessels, right?
Yes.
So people are like, how are you going to get rid of these guns? But there's no guns in heaven, right? Why is that? Because we know the intent of all people. We bask in God's love, right? There's no fear.
That's all there is.
It's all there is, right?
Right.
So it's real simple. As we lean our DNA and we learn unconditional love, guns fall away by themselves. Because as we learn how to know as we bring more attributes from the other side into these vessels, we know people's intentions before they do them. You know what I'm saying? So the kid that was just over at the parade over on 4th of July, his parents would have known right away what he was doing, because they would have known his intent. That's going to mean it's going to take generations and generations, but eventually guns will be as useful as a buggy whip. As we learn unconditional love and we bring more of ourselves into these vessels, no crime can actually happen. You would know their intent as soon as you saw them. As soon as somebody knocked on the door pretending to be, working for the utility, they're there to rob you, right? You would know. You would just be, oh no, I'm opening the door. I already know what you're here for. Right. So crime would just fall off. Somebody walks into a store is going to commit petty theft. You'd have somebody there and be like, oh no, I know what you're here for. You're here for petty theft. Get out of here. How did you know? Because we know. That happens over time, right? And intents, our intent carries ahead of us. It's part of our aura. So all these things would just fall away, and people will be into the position where crime would just fall away. It just falls off because we can see basically the intent of every human.
Right. All truths are known.
Yeah. Right. So it's nothing to get worried about. It'd be nice to get rid of guns now, right? Especially the assault rifles, because there's no practical purpose except hunting humans. And they're too small for deer, and they're not good for home use. You use shotgun for that, but assault rifles, there's no need for them. And I really feel that if we get an understanding that if we choose love and compassion instead of aggro violence all the time as a society, we can get rid of them now. We don't have to wait till we get 40% of our souls into these vessels, and we're able to bring all these thoughts, because it may take 100 more 100 more generations before that happens. If we can do it now, that'd be great.
So one of my favorite quotes, though, is start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can.
Do what you can,
because it all starts right here, right now.
Right. Exactly.
Right, and why wait for 100 generations?
Exactly.
No, we can start that process now, and we already have by having these discussions, by having this opportunity to expand our individual consciousness.
Right. Right. Exactly.
And to know what this life is, and to know what love is, and to know what God is.
Right. As I think about it, and I'm like, what if every person, instead of buying a handgun for $800, went out and bought 20 fruit trees, and they just grew fruit. And they supplied fruit for themselves. They gave their body healthy nutrition. They helped their community and their neighborhood, right? You see a homeless person. Oh, you know what? Here, I got all these peaches and plums. Here, you want some? I'll bring you a basket. I got 20 fruit trees. You know what I'm saying?
Love and
An
service.
act of love.
Yeah.
For decades, these fruit trees produce fruit for 20, 30, 40 years. If not longer. And you can just keep giving and giving and giving, and all these memories of giving you would have over you polishing your gun.
Right. And so now we're raising the vibration.
Hey, I know.
Yes.
If everybody just bought some darn fruit trees, traded in their guns, and got a fruit tree, and just started helping people, and before you know it, the people that have less start having a little bit more.
Right.
Right. They feel hope. They feel hope again, and then. You're not having a war on ethnicities. You're having a war on poverty, and you're fighting it. And you're fighting a war against poverty, and you're helping people.
You spoke about it in another episode about we are here to feel God's love.
Yes.
And we do that through connection with other people.
Yes, we do.
So that is an act of love and service, and that is an act of feeling that vibration of love.
Yes.
And so now we are raising the vibration of ourselves and the people around us. So speak on that a little bit.
So I agree. That feeling you get when you give somebody something, and they're all smiles.
Yeah.
I love that. Right. That feeling is all the time back home.
Yes.
Right. Here we have to create it through our own intent. And when you do that, it sends waves of joy, love, and happiness to everybody. Because that person, say you grew a bunch of peaches, right? And you gave them to a neighbor who was having a hard time, and they brought them into their house, and all the kids are like, "Oh, we got all these peaches," and they're just happy. You're gonna feel that joy. It exponentially gets bigger.
I could already feel that in my heart.
Right.
The vibration of joy.
Joy is one of the few things on this world that multiplies when you share it.
Yes, absolutely.
So as we learn this, and we decide to make a conscious effort to say, enough. I'm just gonna, you know what? I'm gonna see what goodness and happiness and joy and make that a thing. Make that the pivotal point in my life. You understand what I'm saying? So, when people make that conscious effort to say, you know what, I want to do what's right by me, then, because when I do right by me, when I learn self-love, I'm literally loving God. Right, because the more love I understand, the more that I love God, the better my gift of my soul back to God is. Right. So as we take that point of saying, yes, I'm going to do that, and you're like, you know what, I can sidestep religion because where it's at now, I fully understand. But you understand God does exist. We are all created so that we can learn unconditional love. If you take that stance and say, I'm going to learn unconditional love, when the church is there, it's there. It's not there now, it's not there now. Whatever. You just worry about you and your relationship with God, and you make it happen. You make that concerted effort to say, I'm going to choose joy today. I always choose laughter today. Yeah. That's mine, you know?
Good one.
I don't have much as much to give, but I'm going to choose laughter today.
Yeah.
Right. And I bring that. That's my gift.
Because you know what you experience when you experience laughter.
Yeah, you experience love.
Right. Absolutely.
So, yes. Enjoy. And you know what? And they're carrying that laugh to the next customer and the next customer and the next customer.
It's that ripple effect.
It's a ripple effect, right? And it's just one of those things. And people are, people say, Todd, why are you so happy? And I'm like, I don't know, I just am. It's natural now. I'm just always like jolly and carefree, looking for the commonalities and then commenting on it. Be like,
Yes.
I know about that. Hey, let's talk about, and just finding commonalities. And people are like, man, I can talk to anybody. I can go to a bar and just talk to anybody. I can go to wherever and just talk to anybody. You know what I'm saying? Grocery store, it doesn't matter, because I'm looking for commonalities, not differences.
Yep.
When you change your mindset, I had a problem with social anxiety disorder when I was younger, in my 20s. And I realized what was happening after reading a book here, a book there. I realized I was living in judgment.
There it is.
So I stopped judging others. Like I couldn't do karaoke in front of people because whenever a karaoke person come up, I just slice them apart with my brain.
Yep.
And then I'm like, no. A couple of times I started practicing. I want to find everything they did good.
Yes,
there you go. Everything I did
Changing
good.
your mindset, right?
Right. And then I went up there and I'm like, oh, they're going to see the good parts.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if they don't, you're going to feel the experience as if they are.
So, yes, as I learned, overcame my social anxiety from too much judgment, but that was how I was raised, to judge everything, right? Now I came off that judgment. I'm like, no, I'm looking for similarities and commonalities. Yeah. And it changed the whole perspective of, my whole mentality.
Right. And I've had that same experience. And I think that's why I have had such a paradigm shift, because shifting from judgment, whether I was judging somebody else or thinking that they were going to judge me, but just doing my best, to eliminate judgment, has really opened up a whole new world of possibilities.
Yes.
Because then we can get back to that commonality, that back into that oneness.
Right. The oneness of what we have in common, and how we can share some experiences, right, through our dialogue. And
we're all here doing this work as a soul.
Exactly.
Right? So we're not against each other.
No, we're not.
We're here actually working together.
Right.
To get back home. To get back to that place of peace, to love, to joy.
Joy, right. And I know that's another thing is we're all doing the best we can, just sometimes we don't have a lot. We haven't learned a lot. We have to keep going. Yeah. But I just hope that this podcast is a little puzzle piece, a thread to put in your tapestry. So you'll be like, okay, you don't have to put it in the front. You can put it in the back. It's holding pieces together for you. So you can be like, oh, I get this now. This is the goal. This was on the test. Yes.
Yeah. There it is.
That's what's on the test. I don't have to go to church 1,700 times. No. I have to learn to treat people with dignity and respect. How you treat others.
And I think it's weaving those experiences and that information and that wisdom together, and that's creating the pattern of our soul. It is,
and that's what our tapestry.
Yes. Right.
Exactly. And our tapestries all look different. Mine looks like Picasso. It's all messed up. But you know what? By the time I'm done with it, it's going to be beautiful.
But behind that, though, is what? God. Behind that is love.
Yes. Exactly.
And that's really all that there is.
There is. Right.
Yes.
It's all that there is. It's a labor of love for love. Right. Yeah, oh man, yeah, our ins and outs and the beauty of our soul's journey is what makes our gifts so special to God, because we went about it on our own unique, special way of learning how to love one another. And when every time God gets a new soul, it's gonna be, wow, that I never seen that one before. Because we all did it differently.
Right.
We all did it differently, And there's
so many possibilities.
Yes.
The possibilities are infinite.
They are infinite. Right. Because the world's so big. Yeah. Right. And you can be anywhere, And even if you find two people doing the same thing, right? But they're born in different signs, different years, it's going to give a little different nuance.
It's a different experience, right?
Right. So I always use this example. I say you got two guys named Bob that are plumbers in Detroit, right? And one's You're the Rabbit, and one's You're the Dragon, and then one's a Gemini and one's a Virgo. They're going to have totally different experiences because the little nuances that they chose to be born into, those two guys named Bob aren't going to have the same life. They're going to have totally different lives because they're going to have little fluctuations within their signs and the years they're born. That's why we choose signs and years that we're born, so that we can accomplish certain things.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's just going to change. Even, like I said, even the nuances themselves make our soul's journey so variable. Right.
Absolutely. It reminds me, like, two people can use the same recipe.
Yes.
To cook the same type of meal. But they're not going to come out the exact same way.
Oh, mine come out bad. I'm like, I followed it to the T.
Right?
And
it's like, I used all that same ingredients.
It's not even coming out of the pan. I don't know what the heck I did.
Right.
This is foolproof. Who's the fool now? Me.
It's the individual experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yes, I know what you're saying. Yeah. It's oh God, cooking. But yeah, we do our best and we go from there. And I think that we have any subjects you want to cover?
Oh, there's a whole lot.
There is.
We got a lot that we can cover, but in this episode, I got real tripped up with this one just because it was very heavy. Because I like what you said about, the vessel. That fetus is just a vessel at that point. My son Vincent, when he was younger, he doesn't remember now, but when he was younger, I would say, so what happened before you were here?
Yeah.
Before you were a little boy, before you were in this body, what happened? He's like, well, I used to sit in your belly and I would just play. And I said, okay, well, what did that look like for you? And he says, well, I was just sitting there. And I said, well, where were your feet? And he was breech. He never knew that. But he described and explained how he was sitting in my belly. And he was describing being breech, feet first. How did he know that? How can I explain that? So at that point, the soul was introduced into that vessel. So at what point, if I chose to have an abortion at the end of, my pregnancy, so how do you really know when there is a soul in that body? And equally though, that soul signed up to have that experience. That mother signed up to have that experience. Vincent, as that soul, if I would have had an abortion, but the soul signed up for that. So
Right.
I don't think that that's bad.
Right.
But yet here on the human plane, we judge that as bad.
Right. So if there's ever a situation, and we have, we're going to pass. All right. You don't know it. So what happens is this: from all the NDEs that I've read, they don't know why they're there. I remember being skiing behind a boat, and that's all I remember. When the only option is death, the soul is pulled out. The vessel goes through it, the soul does not. There's one, I don't read him very often, but there was one Sunday school teacher who was a seer, and his name was Edgar Casey. And right, and one time he got onto an elevator and he saw all the vessels had no souls. So he took a step back and got back off the elevator, and then it fell. A few seconds later, doors closed, started to go down, and it fell. They were already gone.
Wow.
You don't feel it. You're not here to feel that pain. You're here to learn. So if there's ever a situation where there is an abortion and the soul decided to come in way earlier than they've been said, the soul won't feel it because the soul gets pulled out. When the only option is death, you don't feel it. If you jump off a 50-story building, they'll be like, oh, I remember staying on top of a building, and I remember starting to jump, and that's all I remember. Yeah, once you leave, once the only option is death, you get pulled out.
So in the case of suicide, do you believe that soul signed up to have that experience, to feel what it felt?
Yes.
To want to have that experience of suicide?
Yes. Some souls have actually come here to have that experience because we're here to have experiences. Some souls just couldn't handle it no more and said, I need out, and they're not sent to hell. There's no hell.
Right.
They're brought back, right, to heaven, and they're like, okay, well, you gotta do this again. You gotta go through this life again and get past this point next time. Right. So it depends. Both of them fit. It depends on that soul. Some are there to have the experience. Some are, I didn't make it, I got to go back home.
Yeah.
And then I got to come back and do it again. And then there's sometimes you commit suicide when you're terminal. You don't have to relive that part because it was only pain. You know what I'm saying? You can't kill yourself at 18 and be like,
and that goes back to like that suffering.
Right, the suffering. You're not here for suffering. You're here to experience, and the only thing you'd be experiencing is pain. So, no, if you're terminal and you have a year left, and you kill yourself, you're not going to hell. You're not punished by God. You're just getting on with your next lifetime.
Right, like you're choosing to no longer to continue that suffering.
That suffering, I'm gonna, New body, please. Over here. Right. Chop, chop. There's my check.
Yeah,
I'm out.
Let's check out and come back again.
Right. Because this is BS over here. When you're suffering like that.
Well, that brings me to, we were talking earlier about the Four Noble Truths.
Yes.
And they are the truth of suffering.
Yes.
The truth of the cause of suffering.
Yes.
The truth of the end of suffering.
Right.
And the truth of the path that leads to the end of suffering.
Right.
And more simply put, suffering exists. It has a cause.
Yes.
There's a purpose for it, right? It has an end. And it has a cause to bring about its end. And so sometimes maybe that suicide could be that cause to bring about the end of that suffering.
Yes.
Is that kind of what you were touching on?
Yeah.
Did I understand that correctly, or?
Yeah. Which one? The one that chose to have the experience, or the one that is terminal, or the one that?
Well, I think it could be applied to any of those. Like, okay, say the terminal case. Okay, so they're suffering. There's a cause to that suffering.
Yes.
There's an end to that suffering, which is
taking yourself out.
And then there's the path that leads to the end of that suffering. And that's why I was thinking, okay, the end of that suffering is when that terminal illness, the body dies.
Yes.
Because of that. There's a cause to that.
Yes.
But then there's also a path that leads to the end of suffering. So could that be choosing to take your own life now instead of continuing to have that suffering?
Yes.
Yeah.
It could be. I mean, it's so many variables.
There are.
And the Four Noble Truths. I love Buddhism. The simple fact that Christianity, if you, from the Dead Sea Scroll perspective, when you look at biblical scholars, not religious scholars, when you look at biblical scholars, they'll tell you early Christianity was just like Buddhism, right? They talk about reincarnation and all this stuff.
All the similarities, right?
Yeah, all the similarities, right? It's all there. And I know with the Four Noble Truths, the only one I know is the second one, which is
the truth of the cause of suffering.
The cause of suffering is want, right? Because the more you want, the more you suffer. The more you try to keep with the Joneses, the more you suffer. The more you go down this world of judgment and ego, the more you suffer. It's just everything's suffering when it comes to want and ego, materialism, all those things. It just, and fear as lack of money, lack of
it's the lack mentality.
Right.
The lack and limitation. Right. And we're going to be stuck in that state of suffering as long as we have that mentality of lack.
I know.
Right.
And it's crazy because we live in America, which is capitalism. It's wanting more and more and more.
Oh yeah, I want the next.
I want the next. I want the next.
The newest
thing, right? And it's literally causing us to suffer. Literally, because if you look, we have the most money in the world by far, right? But we're not even in the top 10 in happiness.
Well, because we are always, as a society, striving for more. So we're working more. We're pushing ourselves more because we have to get more money so we can buy more things.
I know, no, it's crazy.
But yet we're suffering so that we could have more stuff. How
more
does
stuff
that
to make
work?
us happy, right?
Right. And I think that that's when we can recognize that that's the truth of the cause of our suffering.
Right. And here, we're here in California, and we're the richest state in the country, but we're dead last in quality of life because we're pushing ourselves too hard.
As a whole,
we need this big thing. We need this new thing. We don't need any of that stuff. We need to find happiness. We keep buying a bill of goods that is, you need this to be happy, when actually happiness was already within you. You just didn't know it was there.
Right.
The commercial said it's not new. It's over here.
Well, and that brings me to a quote from the Bible that I found recently, and it says, "Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love."
Right.
And so if we can just focus on that,
I know,
and that alone,
let alone, right,
then
right.
we know that we are enough. We have enough.
Right.
There is enough in this life.
Right, and it's crazy because I feel bad for. I remember I had a friend who was evangelical, and I told him, I said, James 2:20, what basically is faith without good works is dead. Right? He goes, where's that in there? I've never seen that. I've never heard that. Where's that? You're lying. I'm like, get your Bible. He wouldn't do it. You're lying. You're making it up. I'm like, the churches are leading people down ego and judgment, but we love Jesus. But here's some other scriptures for judgment. I'm like, or they're getting all their religious ideas from Fox News. I don't know which one it is, because I'm like, that's not it either. Yeah. It's about love. It's about love only, not judgment. So every time you judge somebody, you're literally judging yourself, or setting yourself up to be next in line for that situation.
Right.
Eventually.
Right, because like attracts like.
Right.
I definitely believe in the law of attraction based off of my life and my experiences. So again, going back to my thoughts create my reality.
Yes. I love that.
And so if I'm going to be having those thoughts of judgment, of separation, then guess what? I'm going to be having the experience of that.
Exactly. Frustration. I know.
So here we study the philosophy of Dr. Ernest Holmes. Right. And he says that life is like a mirror and reflects back to the thinker what he thinks into it, or she thinks into it. So again, we're going to see life by what we see from. So if we are seeing from judgment, we are going to be judged. We are going to have that experience. Right. Whether it's now, later, this lifetime, next lifetime, doesn't matter. Right. It's all coming back, because we're all one. We're all together.
And just like my judgment when I had social anxiety, my judgment on others, I mind talked in my own head. And that was my judgment too, against myself. All these people are going to judge me harsh because I judged harsh. Exact thing.
Right. And so you're going to have that experience sooner or later.
Yeah, you're going to have that experience. So I think we're done. What do you think?
I feel good.
Me too. So,
but I am looking forward to the next episode.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
More things to talk about, right?
So always
Never
have
ending.
love and laughter in your heart and keep moving forward.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.